I'm fine, thank you. And there are many heroes in the country. I'm not one of them. I'm just a normal person. Look, if you look at the figures and the statistics, so between 22 and 23, because they're two full years, there has been a 67% increase in, uh, acts of violence. And in the first quarter of 24, there's been a 17% increase since the last quarter. So it's amounted to 245 incidents only this year, and a substantial amount of deaths have taken place. Now, if we are going to talk about resurgence based on these statistics, obviously there's a concern that is growing. But if you look at the resurgence based upon what really do we understand a resurgence with? So, if we look at it 2008 and 2009, what was going on? We were fighting for our survival. That was the strategic paradigm that we were living in. We were fighting for Pakistan's survival. But today, the TTP is fighting for its own survival. So there's a huge strategic shift which is not really visible to the people. And that is one of the things that you have to understand. So what you're seeing right now is a surge, and there are many causes for that surge, and there is a spike that will take place. It will carry on for some time, but I don't think it's too much to be concerned about. I really don't know what they're doing with them, but you see, when you give them space and you allow them access to other external and hostile agencies, and you open the resources like weapons and all that, I would say that there's a substantial amount of aid, and they want to become interlocutors, the one government, and want to be the go-between us, the government of Pakistan, and the TTP. And the only advice that they have is that we should give in and start negotiating with them. So I think that there is a collusion of some sort, but not exactly all-out collusion. We didn't crush them in Bajor alone. There was a overall area of about 48,000 square kilometers of combat zone, and there were seven agencies involved. And out of the seven, five were cleared by us, FC, and 14 division under me. That was 35,000 square kilometers. So we cleared Bajor, Dir, Mamand, Khyber, Orakzai, all these areas, Bunair, even that was not even in the Fata area, it was a settled area. Now, these people were basically upstarts within their own tribes, small time teachers, guards, gunmen, things of this sort, who usurped power by, you know, by removing the leadership, the normal mushers that you have in the tribes, and they usurped the leadership. And essentially, the premise behind the whole thing was to generate revenue, self-generated revenue by taking taxes from the people. So the more they expanded in space, the more money they generated. Now, how did they come to this? This happened because after the Soviet invasion, there was a lot of settlers like Uzbeks and even Egyptians and Arabs and all kinds of people in various agencies, and they intermarried and they stayed there. They settled down, and they actually were incorporated into these gangs, and they became into criminal gangs who started usurping leadership and generating, uh, some kind of revenue. Now, there was a total absence of governance as far as Pakistan was concerned, so they had a vacuum to operate in. And this vacuum became very obvious as it kept on expanding, and then there was concern when it started affecting the settled areas. When it started affecting the settled areas, then Pakistan started responding. First, it responded through negotiations, they failed, and after negotiations, kinetic operations. So this is what these people were. Well, I was informally consulted also during those days, and I was vehemently against any kind of negotiations. And I came on Arshad Sharif's uh, program, and I explained why we were against it and why we should not do it. And so that was obviously it was a strategic blunder in front of us, happening in front of us, and it happened, and the results are there in front of you right now. Now, my reasoning was that there are about 5-6 thousand fighters who were there in Afghanistan, in the Kunar province, and settled out there, given refugee status, and they had families, and with the families, you're looking at about 30-40 thousand people. Now, these families, it became unsustainable for them to live in Taliban controlled Afghanistan after the American withdrawal. So, the first thing that the TTP did was to resettle these people in Pakistan, and that is why they needed a ceasefire. And that ceasefire allowed them to then get their administrative aspects settled. And after having them settled, they renegade in 2022. They went back on their word again, as it was expected. So that was a strategic blunder. Um, Handing over Swat to Sufi Muhammad was a strategic blunder. I objected to it even then. I was serving. You can't take a faction of your people and society and hand them over to a person like Sufi Muhammad and say, do what you will, and we'll have a parallel constitution. It was a stupid thing to do, but we did it. And then we had to fight. We fought in Burer, we fought in Swat, we had to fight, and a lot of people were killed because of this. And we had to completely clean that area up. All the negotiations that we did, all the negotiations failed because we really didn't know what we were doing. And you can't negotiate with TTP. This is a criminal organization. Yeah, Ali, the thing is that let me give you my perception on terrorism first, and then we'll decide whether India is doing that or not. Terrorism is a tool that is used by all intelligence agencies of the world. It is not homegrown. It is not by any group. It is not by people. These are people who are living in some kind of misery or some grievance, and they're grouped together and exploited. No intelligence agency is willing to give up their groups that they have that they can use this violence to intimidate the other group. Nobody will do it because that will put them on the back foot. So my thing is that unless there's an international meeting on reining in these intelligence agencies to stop it, you will never finish terrorism. It will not go away. Now, having said that, if there is a terrorist organization in India, I don't know. We should be supporting them because this is we are in enemy territory as far as they are concerned, and we are enemy territory for them. And I know that the TTP is supported by India, by RAW, by CIA at some time, at some stage, by funds, resources, training, uh, plans and things that this kind of stuff, the kind of weapons that they are all American weapons. And I know they could have got it from TTA, but right now it's very easily accessible. They've got night vision devices. They've got everything that a terrorist organization wants. I can tell you one strategy which is going to be taken very poorly by everybody who listens to you because we are all want to be politically correct. And the strategy against terrorism is always to create equitable terrorism. There is no other strategy for it. And defensive strategy will always fail. You will carry on fighting against people inducted into your country, inserted into your country, and you'll be running behind every bush. But the only way is to be able to deliver the same amount of pain that you're getting. If you can't give that kind of pain, then learn to suffer it and learn to live with it. Yeah, I'm out of the system. I'm not there, and we have intelligence agencies, and I'm sure they have plans. And there's offensive intelligence plans. There's defensive plans, but I'm not privy to them. And even if I was, this is not the forum for me to discuss. See, enemy number one is only because of the disputes that we have, and we have disputes with Afghanistan also. But we think that that dispute can be resolved. But the disputes with India are much more serious, and unless those disputes and core issues are resolved, India will remain an enemy. Secondly, India has a constitutional position in which the constitution dictates that India must take over the territory of Pakistan. Whether they do or they don't, I don't know. But that's a constitutional position that they've taken. So they talk about Akhand Bharat. So therefore, Pakistan has to be wary of it. Having said that, Pakistan's military conventional system has clearly stipulated it will never initiate war. Now, having understood this, that if you don't initiate war, that means you never attack India. So we are not as much a threat to the Indians. And for the Indians to say that we are a threat is a very funny thing to say. They're 8 times our size and about I don't know how many times our economy, and still they are worried about us. So that there's something seriously wrong with them. Oh, I'm sure that they're well prepared. It's easier to prepare for defensive options than for offensive options in conventional war. And so I think we have the force ratios down. We are reasonably in a good position to handle any Indian mischief, if there is any serious kind of mischief. We can handle it. See, what you have to understand, what is a tactical nuclear weapon? A tactical nuclear weapon is a weapon which is used in your own desert areas. So it denies space. It's a space denial weapon, and the only person who can be worried about it is one who intends, carrying out some kind of aggression on you and invading you. If you're not planning to invade, a tactical weapon is not going to bother you. So a tactical weapon denies space, and when it denies space, it actually frees up troops so that your force ratios get better at other places. That's what it is. But anyone who's worried about it is actually worried about it because he has plans to carry out an invasion. We are in a very bad place right now because of number of things. We lack the um, economic capacity. We don't have policy making capacity. We don't have autonomy. We don't have sovereignty. We are getting policies dictated to from outside, and we're being told what to do. So that is a separate issue altogether. But when you talk about a war being fought under those circumstances, if the military wants to take it down, then the war moves from a war of attrition to a war of decision, which moves in a very quick time. And that's the only way we can survive. But then there are other things also. There are deterrences and matters like that. Now, a nuclear deterrence which stops conventional war is declared a failure the moment war breaks out. Therefore, it becomes into a redundant capacity available to you, which is now no longer useful in deterring war because war is already there. So now what happens? So the same thing converts into a war termination strategy. It becomes a component of war termination strategy, and that is what stops that war, which might be going against you. Well, I these somehow the political thinking of various countries has hijacked the military positions on the ground. So what's likely to happen is that with the Modi government winning the elections, which are going to unfold soon, I think they'll restore the status of Kashmir, and that will be the first step to beginning negotiations. And that's a possibility. That's a possibility, but it's anybody's guess. So far, the Indians feel that they are above Pakistan, negotiating with Pakistan, and they don't need to talk to Pakistan. But in the end, they will. Their wealth, etc., and their economic growth is great, but when you measure it against CPEC, the potential that Pakistan has much greater, and therefore that is one of the thorny issues related to Pakistan and India's relationship, and it is fueled by the United States because the CPEC is an irritant to both India as well as to America. Well, they could be linked and they might be trying, but the causes for the insurgency in Balochistan, it's always been there since the 70s, off and on. But the prime concern, the prime reason for it are the Baloch government themselves. Now, have you ever heard of a government which has everybody the minister? The entire lot, I mean. There's not a single person, member of the provincial, government who's not a minister. So there's a total exploitation of the people, and it's also done by the people themselves have done it. But primarily, another reason is extreme lack of governance in every single field, whether it is crime, whether it's corruption, whether it is giving rights to the people, human rights, or whatever you name it, it's there. So it runs all around. Now in Balochistan, it's known as the heroin highway, and that's where the heroin from Afghanistan is to flow down. Now, heroin highway also creates and throws up a life of its own, independent of what is happening around it. So you have one person who is a minister in the provincial government. You will have one person in the revenue office. You will have one person who's actually running the drugs. Now, when you have this kind of an environment, nothing can work out there. Yes, so there's drugs, there's gun running, there's smuggling of fuel from Iran, there's smuggling of other stuff. So you name it, and everything is happening. So how can you impose any kind of rule of law? And when there's no rule of law, the only people who suffer are the poor people who really have no rights, and therefore they get disillusioned, and you have an insurgency on your hands. Well, obviously there are steps taken for security, but I wouldn't call it a security failure because in an insurgency, Uh, a security failure would be where the security has been overwhelmed. That has not happened. But the security has been surprised. So I would point towards an yeah, intelligence failure, and because you're not having enough information. And now in the days of drones and electronic surveillance and cameras and things and all that stuff, why are we going through this intelligence failure? I fail to understand. Look, who benefits by the Chinese getting hit? The benefits only go towards those hostile powers which don't want the Chinese here. Now, China is connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe through the Belt and Road Initiative, and CPEC is the front. It's the gateway to it. So there is no other geographical entity in the world which provides this gateway other than CPEC. China is also trying to. It's a Chinese need because you look at the Malacca Strait. Malacca Strait has 600 million barrels going through it, oil every single day. There are 100,000 ships which go through the Malacca Strait. That is why the Americans are busy making the AUKUS and then making the Quad, and then dominating the South China Seas, and then getting the Philippines, the Vietnamese, the Taiwan, the Japanese, everybody's in it. So there will be a stage where the Chinese will be disconnected if the Malacca Strait is disrupted. Now, the Malacca Strait's alternative is Gwadar. There is no other alternative for it. So a lot of people, when they talk a lot of nonsense, about Gwadar, ye Chabahar se ho jayega, this, that, the other, it cannot happen. Chabahar can take a 20,000 ton ship. Gwadar is the largest, potential to be the largest port in the world. It takes 200,000 ton tankers. There's a big difference. Chabahar can be a satellite port to it. So now this disturbs the world equilibrium as far as how the financial lineup is taking place. And the people who are hostile to it, they are the ones who want to kill the Chinese, so that there is a terrorist activity there. So if it's not TTP, it'll be some sectarian organization. If it's not some sectarian organization, it'll be BLA. If it's not BLA, it'll be some other, robbers and decoys or somebody. Somebody will be paid, somebody will be trained, somebody will be financed, somebody will be, resourced to go and carry out terrorist activities against the Chinese. Well, if you remember the last incident in which Pakistan retaliated and carried out a bombing strike in Iran itself. Now, if you look at that, the response that came, the only two countries out there who passed negative statements, one was India, the other was United States. The rest of the world was talking about reconciliation. America said that Iran got what it deserved, and India said, that Pakistan is always harboring these kind of terrorists. So this is the kind of thing it is, and these are the only two countries who are actually instigating terrorism against one another. India is doing it through Iran into Pakistan, and the United States is doing it into Iran through proxies in Pakistan. This is bringing Iran and Pakistan into a conflict, which is what they both want. Which is what they both want. So for Pakistan to handle this, Iran and Pakistan need to sit down and be sensible about it. And I have already written a paper on it, and that was published also. And that paper really talks about having a 50 kilometers zone in which you have a joint force which is not governed by either government, no intelligence, no law enforcement agency, and is totally autonomous and independent. And you have, alternative sharing of the command. And if you can do that, they will not be corruptible. They'll not be corrupted by any intelligence. They'll not be corrupted by any smugglers. They'll not be corrupted by anybody else. And this organization will be able to bring about a regional peace and improve relation between both countries. But nobody is going to allow this thing to happen. Well, first of all, I don't agree with the term non-state actor. I mean, after all, he's not living in space. He's living in on the earth, in this planet, and in a country and in a state. In that state, he's married, he's got family, he's got children, he goes to the market, he shops, he lives, he eats, he does everything there. So, how is he a non state actor? The term non state actor allows a government to have a legal deniability of their association with him. So, they say, oh, we don't know him. Well, I don't think that's correct. Anybody living within the boundaries of a certain country or territory, they should be responsible for it. And that is what uh, any kind of activity generating from there is which is what we are blaming the one for right now, and they are claiming the same thing. So, as far as we are concerned, I don't think Pakistan is really initiating terrorism because India likes to talk about terrorism being done in Kashmir. Now, most of the terrorist activities that have taken place in the recent past have been false flag operations. False flag operations for them to generate some kind of activity against Pakistan or take a posture or take a stand. Those false flag operations have been exposed at times, and the response that has come in has been dealt with. So I don't see Pakistan really as, as a state running some kind of organization into Kashmir. Some people would want that to happen, but I don't see it happening. But I do see some extremists and I do see some individuals who are not being controlled by the state and who can then facilitate some kind of activity across the border. That can happen. Now, for that, I don't care what's happening in India, but I would strongly recommend to the government to deal with their own extremists. So now tomorrow, if somebody in India decides to bomb Muridke, so what does Pakistan do? Does it defend Muridke against Indian bombers, or does it join the Indians in attacking Muridke? What happens? So why do we put ourselves in these stupid positions for? In KP, obviously, KP had to live through the fallout of the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan and the Islamic Jihad that was then conducted by General Zia and Charlie Wilson. And Charlie Wilson, wasn't it? Was that his name? And yeah, so that lot was here. And then after that, the Americans, and then again the Jihad and all that stuff. So the Islamic Jihad became into the narrative, and that narrative started changing people's minds. Started influencing the thinking and the direction, etc. But when you look at what's happening in Punjab and you look at what's happening in KP, I still don't think KP is as radicalized. It is still democratic in its structure, in its day-to-day living. People still are more free. People are willing to take on any leadership which is on the wrong, and which explains why they vote out people who they don't like and they vote in people who they want. Well, I don't have the solution for it, but we have to understand the problem in its entirety. The first thing is this, that Karachi is started becoming the hub to attract people who are giving up the rural form of life and moving to the urban areas. And therefore, it has not got the depth or the capacity to handle that kind of population. So, if the government doesn't make a plan to have satellites around Karachi and make smaller towns or shift the populations through giving them opportunities and employment elsewhere, Karachi will suffer. Now, when you have an overcrowded place like this, there is bound to be crime. And when you have a government like the kind that we've been seeing, then you're going to have that crime perpetuated by corruption. So, when you have all these things put together, then finding a solution for Karachi is obviously removing the government and then getting somebody sensible out there. But until that happens, we'll have to suffer the consequences of whatever is happening. No, you will never see that happening really because there are a couple of issues. First of all, these are independent and individual chains of careers, and a career that is being followed will not ever allow itself to be subjugated by another chain. So they'll remain independent and they'll remain loyal to their own smaller institutions. That's how it's going to be. Whether it's a good thing to put them together or not, that's again debatable because they have different roles. Their roles are different. ISI should not be dealing in the country, it should be dealing more or less outside and talking about global perspectives. But it's not. And it comes into clash with IB and then it comes into clash with other things and etc. and all that. The MIA is supposed to be looking at the services and from the military threat point of view, but it goes beyond that. So these things, unless they are sorted out, but one of the main issues in intelligence is that an intelligence information that is given in or a report that's given is never subjected to an inquiry, and that allows them a lot of space, a lot of leverage to do all kinds of funny things. Therefore, they're overrated. They've never delivered anything, and we've always had a problem with intelligence as far as our security is concerned. You see, Fauji Foundation is not where I was, but Fauji Foundation is the mother organization and it is a welfare organization. The British gave 36 million rupees to Pakistan somewhere in the 50s, and those 36 million were distributed amongst the provinces, and they were told to carry out the development program and all. And the provinces, they mishandled that money, misappropriated it, and left 18 million, which was then taken back by the Ministry of Defense, and an organization was brought up, and that organization was the Fauji Foundation, and it was meant to bring about the welfare of retired JCOs, NCOs, and ORs, give them free medical help, and give them free education for their children in far-flung areas. So now the Fauji Foundation looks after 10% of Pakistan's population, giving them free education and free medical help. And in places like, opposite the Wakhan corridor in Chitral, and in places where there is no other government presence and all. So that's where they are, and that's what they do. Now, as far as taxpayers' money is concerned, no taxpayer money comes here. This is the highest tax-paying organization. Now, because the Fauji Foundation needs funds, it had to have commercial outlets so as to have a corporate organization. So FFC, which is I was heading, is the one which makes the money. Now, FFC is owned by the army, but it not run by the army, except for having the CEO and MD. And one could argue that, well, that means your army is running it. Yeah, but he's retired and he's there. Now, they replaced that recently with civilians, and there is a huge difference in the pay and allowances. So whereas I think there's about 500, 600% difference in the pay and allowances of the people who came in now compared to what the military people were. The military people were only there for giving it a overarching kind of leadership, but they were experts in it. So therefore, FFC today is the highest taxpayer continuously for the last 10 years. So how can you claim the taxpayers' money is coming here? We have been paying taxes to the government. Secondly, it is through the SECP that it is organized, and it's listed as a listed company. The board, it has the people which the SECP says so, and it's the board which makes these decisions. And the board has not got military people in it alone. They're all civilians inside it also. So 60% of it is owned by civilians on the list as a listed company. 40% is owned by the army, and that 40% goes to the FF for welfare. It doesn't go to any individual. The 60% is taken away by people who are in the business as it's a listed company. Now, when you're saying it's a listed company, 60% is taken away. This is one of the few companies which pays dividends on every quarter. Every single quarter it pays, and everybody wants that money. So therefore, it has a consistent cost. There are no spikes going up and down, no sellouts. It's just a good place to invest and get your money back. I don't know what kind of advice I can give under the circumstances right now, because at the moment I don't see policies or systems functioning as they conventionally should. So my recommendation to all Pakistanis would be to get themselves an education which is internationally recognized, and be able to operate in through United Nations and through the World Bank and through all kinds of international organizations, and help their country through that, because here they'll just get unemployment. But if they go and do this, what I'm saying, um, through an international recognized organization, they'll be able to deliver more.